Hey everyone, my name is Justin Gaffrey and today we're going to be painting a seascape painting. When I was learning how to paint, I taught myself how to paint the natural environment around me, and I live in Northwest Florida that has a lot of coastal landscapes, and it's actually my favorite place to explore, so I know the area really well. And so I'm allowed to paint a lot of things out of my memory, and these seascape paintings I do often are out of my memory. And what I created here is a very simple composition to help you get a win to learn how to paint a seascape painting. And so let's start painting. So for the beginning of the seascape, what we do is we have to put a base coat on the wood panel. And this base coat we make is a heavy concentration of titanium white with a little bit of phthalo blue. And it's kind of a semi-gloss finish to it. The majority of this base coat is actually going to be covered with texture, except for the area near the horizon we're going to put 2 coats on. And I'll kind of walk you through that. But the rest is just getting a nice foundation, kind of as a primer. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You just kind of going to get a nice coverage on there so you get a good, bond between the wood and the texture. Basically, also on this seascape painting, what we're going to be doing is we're going to work our way from top down to bottom. And the idea here is to create an impressionistic seascape painting to give you the success and kind of the foundation of building out a painting that may give you the confidence to try another painting. I believe in having a good win to propel you to the next painting. And this composition is designed in a way for me to do that, and this is kind of how I taught myself how to paint too. So, as I said before, it's important around the horizon to put the extra coats on there, and we're going to make the horizon around a third of the way down. We don't make horizons in the middle, the rule of thirds. It's a pretty simple rule to follow right here. And so I'm going to just put those extra coats on there because where the water is on the horizon, we want a nice smooth line. And we're actually going to tape that line off with a piece of tape that I put in the kit here. And then when we start building out the sky, we're going to keep a good distance away from that so we have a nice clean transition. And these are ways to help you, create this nice horizon that feels natural without going too hard in the impressionistic part in there. I know that might not make a lot of sense, but it makes sense to me. And so what we're going to do here after it's dried is I made little marks there with my knife or any kind of measuring tool, but just so you have a nice even horizon after the panel is dried. Get that taped on and pushed down towards the side. Just make sure it's even, before you push it all the way down. The bottom side is actually where the water is going to meet, and we're going to stay away from the top of the tape by an inch or 2 so we can keep that nice transition on that horizon, which will shortly all make sense. And we're going to start the painting with a heavy white texture for the sky, and we'll be piping it directly on the wood panel. And that's the advantage of working in these bags and everything. I use the wood panels as my palette in the very beginning because I have the room, and why not? And we're going to mix a little bit of the phthalo blue into the white and create, our nice sky color, our sky blue. And start with a very small amount of blue because you don't want to make it too dark, and you can always add more if you want it dark. But you could see that space that I left between the tape. You want to try and keep that space the entire time. And what we're doing right now is more so than worrying about what everything looks like, we're just getting coverage of the paint wrapped around the sides and tops. And we're going to we're going to focus on the composition of what it looks like here once we get it all fully covered. You can see there I'm creating this kind of like semicircle pattern. I do this very often in my paintings, and it shows the movement of the sky. And some of that white is pulling in just because we didn't thoroughly mix all the paint, but that's okay. And you can see that kind of half circle movement there. That's going to be the whole flow of everything that we're going to be working on here. And when I'm dragging that knife on there, I'm not touching the wood panel. I'm hovering just above it, and so it's pulling the paint, but not scraping the wood. If you're scraping the wood, you're pushing down too far. And so make sure you have a clean knife on this one and try not to go below that white line and just pull it up. You're just hovering over and dragging it up in that nice semicircle pattern. And when that white comes in, when you come back, you're dragging it even further above the paint, and it's just kind of grabbing out these little clouds up there. And for the next part, we're gonna make the sun. And you gotta make sure that your knife is really clean for this, because we're gonna be mixing Indian yellow. And if you mix the Indian yellow with the blue, you're gonna have a green sun and a green sky. So it's gonna be really important to try and get this done in minimal strokes, and don't try and overwork and mix it. And I'm just gonna create this circular swirl pattern in the sun. And I'm not letting it touch the blue. You can see you don't see any blue in there. Eventually it will get a little bit in the blue, but I'm just hovering over the top. And you gotta make sure that you clean the knife in between when you touch the blue. Just get that paint off of there. And you can use your palette or a wet, towel or whatever you need. But I've got my next layer of the outer swirl of the sun, and I'm gonna be pushing that outwards. And as you can see there, where I touched the blue, I stopped. You don't want to go back into it. On the right side, it kind of hovered over perfectly, and it's okay if it cuts in. And just finishing up some nice last little strokes pulling around there. If you do get the blue in there, don't go back and touch it. Just let it be, and then go back over it with some more paint so you don't make that green. We have this nice circular swirling sun pattern blended in with the clouds and everything. So we need to push the paint towards the front of the bag, and it works its way out the bag a lot better. And now we're gonna be working on the water side. And we're gonna mix some phthalo green and phthalo blue together, which is gonna give us a nice turquoise color. And basically how the composition is gonna work, we're gonna have the darker water from left to right getting lighter. And somewhere towards the middle area is where the waves start to build up and build in height and lead it into the shoreline of the dunes. And I'm gonna push this, just hovering right over the top, over the side. And that white is just getting pushed under the blue. You'll see it kind of just open up here in a minute there. But we're just kind of just dragging the knife right over the top of there. Over the side of the panel, no problem to go over the side. It looks good when it's just kind of like water falling off the edge of the earth there. You can see just these light strokes just pulling over the top. And right there where the blue stops on the right is where we're gonna build our waves. And this is where we're gonna have the higher texture waves pulling in and start bringing in lighter colors of the phthalo green and phthalo blue. But more on the phthalo green this side, because as you get closer to the water, it gets more green. As you get further out, it gets more of that deep blue. And just doing these little hovering pulls kind of blend that dark and the light side together. And then when I'm hitting the waves, I'm pulling straight up. And if you need to use your hand to hold it back a little bit, not a problem. I'm just creating these nice little wave patterns. These are impressionistic waves. They're not perfect, but just to show the movement of the water and the height, as it's getting closer to the shore. And then also I said, getting lighter as we get into the shore, which is, it's working out pretty good. We're going to put some more white in a minute, but we're going to go ahead and pull off the tape. And this is really important now. Once we pull this tape off, we have to be really careful because we don't want to mess up our horizon, but we kind of need to get it out of the way. It's kind of a fun part when you pull it off to get this nice clean line. And then you'll see what I meant by keeping that nice transition between the two. You really don't need to pick it up to get it off, but I had to get under there to grab it. And there you have that nice transition line from the water to the sky. I'm really horrible at painting straight lines, and so I don't really mind using the tape to do that. But now we have to start being more careful when we start working on the horizon, because we don't have that tape to save us. And so what's going to happen here is on the right-hand side, working from top down at the horizon, you kind of building out like a tree line and a distant dune line, and this where the sand meets the water, and that's all the rest of the areas that we're going to be painting in here. This last little bit here is like where the water's meeting the shore, and it becomes more white and coming into the sand. And where I live in the Gulf Coast of Northwest Florida, the sand actually is super white. It looks like snow sometimes. But you can see how easy that is to just transition that over. And so now we need to make a little bit of green, and I'm mixing I can use the same blue that I was using for the water, mix a little bit of the Indian yellow, and if I want a little lighter, I can add a little bit of white to it. And you can just go lighter or darker wherever you want to be. I created this color palette to keep it really simple. Oftentimes you could use a lot more colors in here, but right now I'm trying to keep it like a nice, easy, workable color palette, and minimal color palettes are good to learn with. And so these are kind of impressions of trees in the background that I'm kind of dropping in. I'm using the side of the knife and kind of just slapping them on there and letting them drop off, and I'm pulling them straight up so they don't get too fat. And so this is kind of pulling in here where it's kind of meeting the sand dune line. We have these big white sand dunes with the little scrub oaks on them, and this is kind of what this is going to represent. And be really careful at this point here, because you don't want to drag too much of that green into the water. It starts to look a little bit unnatural, and you start to lose that nice composition and contrast of the white, and we don't want to lose too much white. And I'm going to pipe the sand dune directly in on that corner, and I'm going to use some of the yellow. It's like a nice contrast reflection from the sun coming into the sand dune there. Just a very tiny bit of yellow. Don't use too much. It's like a little glare of yellow for the sand dune here. And so you can see this impression of the sand dune kind of leading off onto the right hand side there. And these areas now, like I said, when you get close to that water, try not to get too close, because once you start pulling the yellows and the greens in there, sometimes it gets kind of hard to pull it out. And I feel like we had a little bit of white, so I'm going to just add a little bit more texture and drawing the sun closer down into the horizon there, and just creating these swirling patterns of the sun, kind of just swooping up onto each side, to the right and to the left. Because the space is good in between, but now just kind of just drawing it in and just kind of bring it all together. But you could see that reason why I kept that area flat, because it shows depth and it just makes an easy transition on the horizon. So I have a little bit of green left, and I'm gonna kind of fill in some more of the sand dune area and just put a little bit of green in there, and just finish up the sky there, just doing some last minute touches. The painting is primarily done. I'm gonna just use up some last of the paint I have here, kind of pull some texture off to the right to kind of balance out all the other textures, giving a little bit more movement. You can see it kind of just tapping it on the side there to kind of let it pull off. But yeah, this is the Seascape painting. Got a little bit of paint left over you can use for whatever you want, and you can see here all the nice textures coming off the side. Yeah, and so here's your Seascape painting. Waves and sand dunes and nice swirly sky with sun and clouds.